Today at the National Press Club, China's ambassador to Australia, Xiao Qian. The ambassador was previously China's top diplomatic representative in Indonesia before taking up his current position in Canberra early this year. Here's Xiao Qian with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia for today's Westpac address. I'm David Crowe, Chief Political Correspondent for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, and also a Director of the club here. Our guest today is His Excellency Xiao Qian, Ambassador of the People's Republic of China. With his address to the National Press Club of Australia, this is his first address to the National Press Club. He arrived here in Australia in April after a career in the diplomatic service in many countries for China, most immediately just 4 years in Indonesia, a brief stop in Beijing, and then here to his appointment in Australia. Over his career, he has served in Ethiopia, India, and many other countries before this appointment in Australia. Talking to him before this speech, I found it interesting that his background includes many things, but at university he studied, among other subjects, Western literature, including iconic American author Jack London. So he's a man of very many interests. We welcome him to the club today. Please welcome him to the podium.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Well, it's a big audience today, and I'm very much honored. Thanks, David, for your kind introduction. And good to see so many friends from the press, including some of my colleagues from the diplomatic corps in Canberra. And so many friends from the press. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's indeed my great pleasure to address the National Press Club. Thank you all for your presence today. My special thanks to Peter Phillips. He's there. We talked about addressing the NPC last month when I was in Sydney, and thank you for your advice. And thanks to Maurice Riley, CEO of NPC, for writing me to extend your kind invitation, which gives me an opportunity to share my views on the much discussed, much talked about China-Australia relations. I feel very much honored to be Chinese ambassador to this country. Both China and Australia are great countries. We are two great peoples. Our two peoples have always cherished friendly sentiments towards each other. In the past 6 or 7 months since I came here as ambassador, I did some travel, both in the eastern coast and also on the western coast. And I try to reach out and meet as many people as possible, including the federal governments, the state governments, also so many colleagues and friends from different walks of life in Australia. And my feeling is very strong about the hospitality and friendship that Australian people are having towards the Chinese people, towards China. And I also feel very strongly about their expectations for a sound, stable, friendly, and cooperative relationship between two countries. And as ambassador, as a new ambassador, coming at a very special juncture, I have been very, very, very encouraged. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this year happens to be the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Australia. If we look back at the past 50 years, we have indeed made great achievements in developing our bilateral relations. Contacts and exchanges at all levels and in all fields have been very frequent. Friendship and mutual trust have been constantly enhanced. The progress in practical cooperation has been incredibly outstanding. Here I have some figures for you. China has been Australia's largest trading partner since 2009. Our trade volume has surged from less than 100 million US dollars in the year 1972 to over 207 billion US dollars in the year 2021. That's counting for 34.2% of Australia's total import and export in the year of 2021. And Australia's trade surplus with China has reached 60 billion US dollars in that year alone. From that year, we have another 4 years, and that number has almost doubled. You can imagine this is a huge number. China is Australia's top export destination, with export to China accounting for 38.8% of Australia's total export. In goods in 2021, China is also Australia's largest source of imports, with imports from China taking up 28.1% of Australia's total imports of goods in 2021. And starting from 2018, China became Australia's largest source country of international tourists and tourist spending, as over 1 million Chinese tourists spend over 10 billion Australian dollars annually during their stay in Australia. Despite the impact of COVID-19, China continues to be the largest source of international students for Australia. As of May this year, there are 131,400 Chinese students studying in Australia, accounting for about 28% of Australia's total international students. Well, ladies and gentlemen, these are just some of the many figures, but they are telling us a very important fact, that the cooperation between China and Australia is important to both sides, and it's mutually beneficial in nature. In the past couple of years, unfortunately, the relationship between China and Australia was caught in difficult situation due to reasons known to all. This has greatly impacted the bilateral exchange and cooperation in various fields and severely damaged the friendship between our two peoples. This is something we don't want to see, and it goes against the interests of our two countries and our two peoples. Now, with the recent federal election, we have a new Australian government. Of course, this is the domestic affair of this country. It's the choice of the Australian people. But it did provide us with a possible opportunity to reset the relationship between our two countries. Chinese Premier Xiao Qian sent his congratulatory messages to the new Prime Minister of Australia, and Prime Minister Albanese returned with a letter of thanks. Defense ministers, foreign ministers from our two countries held their bilateral meetings. We have also seen ministerial communications between the two countries on education, on economy, and on trade. The meeting between the two foreign ministers was especially productive. Important consensus were reached. The two sides reaffirmed their comprehensive strategic partnership and expressed willingness to strengthen engagements, enhance mutual trust, properly handle differences, remove obstacles, and promote practical cooperation in a spirit of mutual respect and mutual benefit. These consensus are significant for the future development of China-Australia relations. The positive progress in our bilateral relations is encouraging. It's an encouraging start. And of course, there's a lot of work to be done. It's very important for both sides to make further efforts to keep the momentum take actions for substantial progress, and strive to bring our bilateral relations back on the right track. In this connection, State Councilor Wang Yi from China put forward proposals from the Chinese side, which we released briefly. By the way, it was proposals. If you refer to the Chinese version, it was 希望, means hope, and it's not demand, as we've been reported in certain media. And I would like to share with you my views on the following points. First, to reshape the perception on China and regard China as a partner rather than a rival. The essence of the point made by the Chinese side is actually the relationship between China and the current international order. Is China a champion or challenger? The fact of the matter is China is a participant, a builder, and a contributor to the existing international system. China is the founding member of the United Nations and the first country to sign the UN Charter. China is a member of almost all universal intergovernmental organizations in the world. China is the largest troops contributing country among the P5s of the UN Security Council, and we are the second largest budget contributor to the UN peacekeeping. China attained the poverty reduction goal of the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development 10 years ahead of schedule, contributing more than 70% to the global poverty reduction efforts. As UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres said, in the decades since, China has become an increasingly important contributor to the work of the organization and a major pillar of international cooperation. In the past more than 40 years or more of reforming and opening up to the outside world, tremendous changes have happened in China. China's comprehensive national strength has been significantly enhanced, but China's diplomatic philosophy, China's foreign policy remain unchanged. China supports necessary reform and improvement to the current international order and system, but China never seeks to start a new one. China firmly opposes the international system with the UN at its core. The international order based on international law and the basic norms governing international relations based on the purpose and principles of the UN Charter. Because it serves the fundamental interests of China. China is developing, but China's development is to achieve above and beyond, not to challenge or replace any other country. No matter how China develops itself now or in the future, China will never seek hegemony, expansion, or sphere of influence. The development of China-Australia relations is at a critical juncture. China's policy of friendship and cooperation towards Australia remains unchanged. An objective and a rational perception of Australia on China and a positive and pragmatic policy towards China are fundamentally significant for a long-term, stable, and predictable partnership between China and Australia. Second, to create a favorable atmosphere and consolidate the cooperative relations of mutual benefit. Practical cooperation has been the backbone for China-Australia relations, making greater contributions to the development of China-Australia relations for the past 50 years. Even in times of difficulties and fluctuations, as we experienced in the past several years, extensive and in-depth practical cooperation between our two countries played a special role as a stabilizer and a ballast without which our bilateral relations could have been even worse. China and Australia are economically highly complementary towards each other. Australia has been a long-term stable supplier of mineral and energy resources for China. China has been a competitive commodity supplier for Australia as well. Such practical cooperation has fostered a close partnership between our two countries. When we cooperate, we both win. When we don't, we both lose. So it is imperative for the governments of our two countries to adopt positive policies towards each other, take positive and concrete measures to improve the atmosphere of cooperation, solve differences through consultation, create favorable conditions to better serve our mutually beneficial cooperation. At present, the global economy is facing difficulties such as high inflation, weak recovery, and tight supply chains. The World Bank forecasts that the global growth will slow down and economic recession will be hard to avoid. Under such circumstances, to maintain practical cooperation between China and Australia is not only conducive to the stable economic development of our two countries, but also will carry special significance for us to deal with the current global economic challenges. Thirdly, to respect each other, seek common ground, properly handle difference. There are many areas where China and Australia share common interests. There are many issues on which China and Australia have common grounds. And these are the areas we have been cooperating, and we should continue to cooperate to the interests of both sides. Areas like economic development, improvement of people's livelihood, environmental protection, regional cooperation, climate change, combating cross-border crimes, free trade, multilateralism, among others. At the same time, as the old saying goes, no two leaves are alike. China and Australia, we are different in many aspects, in history, in culture, in religion, in development stage, and in political system. Different as we are, there are no areas where we have fundamental conflicts of interest. So it is very important for both sides to take constructive approach towards these differences. Try to narrow down differences through communication and dialogues in a spirit of mutual respect. The least thing we should do is to allow these differences to obstruct, even hijack the overall relationship and cooperation between our two countries. The world is diversified and the political system is taking different forms in different countries. Whether a certain country has chosen a good political system or not, is for the people of that country to have the say. As we say it in China, only the wearer of the shoes knows whether the shoes fit or not. The key question is whether the system could help its people to live a better life. The system of socialism with Chinese characteristics under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party has achieved remarkable success. It fits China, it's good for China, and it has won the heartfelt support of 1.4 billion Chinese people. Here are some figures. After 40 years of reform and opening up from the year 1978 to the year 2018, China's economy has grown 225-fold. Per capita GDP has increased from $155 in the year 1978 to $8,800 in the year 2018. per capita income has grown 22.8-fold. And China has contributed over 30% of the world's economic growth, and it has become the world's leading power of economic development. China has successfully built up a modestly prosperous society in all respects. Chinese people have been lifted out of absolute poverty in a complete way. The efficiency of China's whole process, people's democracy, speaks for itself. It took China decades to go through the development journey that took developed countries centuries to complete. Australia is a diversified country in many aspects, and diversity is an important contributor to Australia's success. The past 5 decades have shown that China and Australia, we can be friends, we can be partners, in spite of our differences in political system and development stage. The fourth point, to develop an inclusive relationship based on the interests of our own two peoples. As independent sovereign states, China and Australia each has its own national interests. Each also conducts exchanges with other countries in the world and builds various partnerships. China and Australia share mutual interests with each other, while at the same time, each shares mutual interests with other partners as well. One's interests are sometimes the same or similar with the others, but sometimes not, which is pretty normal. China respects Australia's normal exchanges and cooperation with other countries. China has no intention to interfere in or undermine Australia's relations with a third party. At the same time, it is our belief that China and Australia should make independent judgments and decisions to develop our own bilateral relations based on the interests of the people of China and the people of Australia, free from interference from a third party. 50 years ago, Prime Minister Whitman overcame tremendous difficulties and challenges, made the brave decision to establish diplomatic relations between Australia and China. In the initiation of cooperation with China and the engagement with Asia have proven that Australia is fully capable of playing its role independently in international affairs. As an important major country in Asia-Pacific, as a founding member of APEC, Australia has its unique geographical and cultural advantages. Australia could play an even bigger role to promote exchanges and cooperation between the East and the West, and could make even greater contribution to the prosperity and stability of the Asia-Pacific region. Fifthly, and the last point, to promote mutual understanding between our two peoples, to lay down a solid foundation of mutual friendship. Amity between our peoples holds the key to sound relations between our two countries. Over the past 50 years, there have been established more than 100 pairs of sister provinces, sister states, and sister cities between China and Australia. Before COVID-19 pandemic, there were nearly 200 flights between our two countries every week, carrying nearly 2 million passengers visiting each other every year. And China has been Australia's largest source of international students for 7 consecutive years since 2015. And in addition to this, there are more than 1.2 million overseas Chinese working and living in different parts of Australia, making outstanding contribution to Australia's economic, social, and multicultural prosperity, and at the same time, to the friendship, exchange, and cooperation between our two countries. Everyone is entitled to his own views, but unarguably, the policy adopted and the information released by the government do have direct influence on the attitudes of the public. If the government of our two countries adopt positive policies and positive measures towards each other, protect and encourage the friendship between our two peoples, it would be highly conducive to a healthy and stable development of our bilateral relationship. Media has a special role to play in the forming of public opinion. Here at MPC, I'm talking to the media, but allow me to be frank. At least this is my feeling, how I feel about it since I came here about 6 months ago, 7 months ago. That here in this country, the media coverage on China are mostly not positive, or to be straightforward, are mostly negative. It is simply difficult to find out news about China that is positive. We do have, but it's pretty low, disproportionately low. No country is perfect. No country is perfect. However, a coverage on a country that is always in a negative perspective is nowhere near to telling the truth about that country. That's how I feel about it. And the coverage on China of such kind is, on many occasions, many times misleading. It's also harming the friendship between our two peoples. So it's important to take an objective perspective on China. Tell stories about China in all dimensions. That's going to be helpful for the Australian public to know what China truly is. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this about our bilateral relations. Well, the Taiwan question has received much attention recently. On August 2nd, the U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited China's Taiwan region. This is a serious violation of the One China principle and violation of the provisions of the three China-U.S. joint communiques. It has a severe impact on the political foundation of China-U.S. relations and seriously infringes upon China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It gravely undermines peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and sends a seriously wrong signal to the separatist forces for the so-called Taiwan independence. Speaker Pelosi insisted on visiting Taiwan region in disregard of China's strong opposition, making it clear to the world it was the U.S. side who first took provocative actions to change and undermine the status quo. And it is the U.S. side that should and must take full responsibility for the escalation of tensions in the Taiwan Strait. China is compelled to take countermeasures to safeguard its national sovereignty and territorial integrity, which is legitimate and justified. Australia government has reaffirmed on several occasions its commitment to the One China principle. As is clearly stated in the 1972 joint communique between China and Australia. Here I quote, "The Australian government recognizes the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China, acknowledges the position of the Chinese government that Taiwan is a province of the People's Republic of China," end quote. The One China principle is a solemn commitment by successive Australian governments, either it's Liberal or Labor, for the past 5 decades. This principle should be strictly abided by and fully honored. It should not be misinterpreted or compromised in practice. We hope that Australian side could take China-Australia relations with serious attitude. Take the One China principle seriously. Handle the Taiwan question with caution, but without discount. Ladies and gentlemen, the coming December 22nd, we mark the 50th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between China and Australia. I think it's perfect time for our two countries to review the past, look into the future, take concrete actions in the spirit of mutual respect and mutual benefit, strive together to bring China-Australia comprehensive strategic partnership back on the right track. It's going to be in the interest of our two countries and our two peoples. Thank you for your presence and thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. We have many questions from the media, and thank you again for your first speech to the National Press Club. Clearly, the tensions over Taiwan are a major subject at the moment, and you spoke about the importance of economic growth and economic partnership between Australia and China and the growth that China's achieved over decades. But do you accept that GDP growth does not mean much if war breaks out and if a nation is conducting military drills around the Straits of Taiwan, that then causes uncertainty and fear that then undermine that growth? Now, Nancy Pelosi's visit last week has led to several days of military drills, and the PLA announced yesterday that it was going to continue drills, including, from the reports I saw in the China Daily, surface-to-ship simulated attacks. Now, in what way is that the action of a stabilising nation? How long will those military drills continue?
Is it a question?
Yes. How long will they
thanks,
continue?
David. Well, it's a question. The last one is a question, but I think before the question, there were a couple of points you made as a statement. Allow me to say a few words on the points that you made before your question. I think the question now is really about the essence of One China policy. The critical point is if every country put the One China policy into practice with sincerity, with no compromise, it's going to guarantee the peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The visit by Speaker Pelosi to the Taiwan region is exactly the reason that has caused the violation of the commitments by the U.S. government to One China policy, and has caused the escalation of tension across Taiwan Strait. And the Chinese side is taking action in reaction to what has been done by the U.S. side. And our purpose is to send a message, clear and out, to those who are violating the commitment of One China policy, who are supporting One China, One Taiwan, or two Chinas. We're sending a message to those who are trying to split Taiwan from China. The message is clear. This is an action in reaction to the provocations from the U.S. side, from the separatist movements in Taiwan Island. And the reaction is legitimate. It's justified, and there's no reason for a reapproach. And as for how long the military exercise and drills are going to last, I think our spokesman for the National Defense, Minister of Defense, also our spokesperson for the Minister of Foreign Affairs have made it pretty clear that these are the actions as a countermeasure to what has happened, what has been done by the U.S. side, what has been done by the regime in Taiwan. And it's a determination to show that on the question of Taiwan, there's no room for compromise. It's not something like economic development or trade relations or specific issues in some other areas. On the question of Taiwan, it's an issue relating to sovereignty and territorial integrity. There's no room for us to compromise. And as for how long it's going to last, at proper time, I think there will be an announcement.
Thank you. The next question is from Anna Henderson and Helen Chen from SBS.
大使先生您好，我是来自 SBS 普通话节目的 Helen Chen。您刚刚提到今年是澳中建交50周年，那么中国方面是否会采取一些举措来改善目前两国的关系呢？比如说取消对澳贸易限制，比如说释放在中国被关押近2年的澳洲公民陈雷。谢谢。
And I will just translate in English. Anna Henderson, SBS World News. You mentioned the 50th anniversary of relations between Australia and China. To mark this, is it possible that China will make practical moves to improve the relationship, such as lifting trade restrictions on Australia and or releasing Australian citizen Chang Lei?
Well, thank you for the question. As I said in my speech, there was a difficult time for a couple of years in the past between our two countries, and now there's an opportunity for a possible reset of the relationship. And here we have a good start ever since the new Labour government came into power. But this is a good start only, and there's a lot to be done to really reset this relationship. And there's a lot of issues on the table, many disputes to be solved. Our policy is that we are for friendly cooperation with Australia. We're ready to work together with Australia's new government to put this relationship back on the right track. Specifically, I think it's been very helpful if both sides take objective perspective on each other, take positive policies and concrete actions. And in this process, the issues on the table will be gradually solved, or we're going to find out solutions to these issues. Currently, there are being top-level communications, there are being high-level contacts, even face-to-face contacts, but we have not yet come to the stage to discuss about how to solve those specific issues, either political issues or trade issues or some other individual cases issues. We are ready to compare notes with the new government and to get engaged in those process. As for the trade disputes, as you mentioned, I would rather not to use the word sanctions. I think this issue, perhaps I could categorize it in different groups. One kind is a trade dispute between the two governments at the government level. These are mainly on the tariffs on certain products from Australia. And those were imposed by the Chinese customs. Indeed, it happened. Yeah, that's true. It was an official action. In response to the complaints from some of the Chinese companies who are involved in the similar businesses, they complain about the dumping of certain products from Australia. And once there's complaint, according to the WTO, the Chinese government has the obligation and the right to increase tariff to protect our own industry. And the case is now in the WTO, and we are ready to sort it out and solve these disputes through WTO with the Labour government. If the new government in this country is ready to discuss it bilaterally, it's okay. We're ready to talk about those things. Second type is more about the people's attitudes. When there was some policies taken or actions taken by the previous Australian government on some of the major Chinese companies, Chinese projects, Chinese businesses in this country, for example, Huawei, ZTE, and many other Chinese companies, causing severe damages economically to these companies. Basically, it's been stopped Huawei of any kind of business in this country. And that's a huge disruption to the normal business relations between our two countries. And these actions have been sending very negative messages to the people in China. And they're not happy, to be honest. And they are, if you look at the reaction from the public in China at that time, even nowadays, they're still not happy about those actions. And just like you go to the shops and you buy something and you're offended, you're not happy, then perhaps you are thinking about go to some other store to buy the similar products. So there are people in China who are really calling for buying some other products rather than the Australian products. That's the attitudes of the public. It happened when we have some problems with our relations with other countries as well. For example, our neighboring country to the east, there was more a severe reaction from the Chinese public. And for this kind of problem, my expectation is that once we have more positive messages, more positive actions, more positive policy to be taken by the new government, it's going to improve the atmosphere. And the people in China will be happy to come back to the market, to come back to Australia, to buy the best quality Australian products, which are very popular in China. That's true. And third category is the caution taken by some of the Chinese companies. They are thinking like, what has happened to Huawei and the ZTE? Is it going to happen to me tomorrow? Is it going to happen to my company some other day? So there are companies from China who used to be interested in the Australian market, but they became cautious. And some of them try to find out alternatives, like investing in Latin America or in Africa. That's true. As ambassador in this country, I'd love to have more investment from China in Australia. And I would like to see an improvement of environment for the businessmen to do business in this country. We have so many things we can cooperate. It's beneficial to our both sides. Thank you. Oh, sorry, for the individual cases, there are a couple of Australian citizens in China. They are under custody according to Chinese rules and laws. And their basic rights are well protected. Don't worry about that. And during the pandemic, during the severe periods of the pandemic in the cities where they are detained, there were times when they were not accessible to their relatives or the diplomats of Australia. It was because of the pandemic. Now they can get easy to get access to their relatives either in Australia or their Australian embassies in China. And the cases is still under jurisdiction process, and we're going to sort it out according to Chinese rule and the laws. Thank you.
Well, that communicates the Australian concern about Cheng Lei, that's for sure. The next question is from Stephen Jetchitz from ABC.
Hi, Ambassador. Thanks for your time. I'm told that the Taiwan Affairs Office has, in fact, just this morning released a new white paper on Taiwan. And the white paper asserts that China will, quote, not renounce the use of force, and we reserve the option of taking all necessary measures. It also says while use of force would be the last resort taken under compelling circumstances, it doesn't lay out what those circumstances are. Sir, can you explain to Australians who are concerned and worried about the prospect of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan and the inevitable consequences of that invasion, what constitutes precisely, in the minds of the Chinese government, a compelling circumstance that would justify a use of force across the strait?
Well, thanks for the question. In the first place, I'd rather not use the word invasion when we talk about China and Taiwan. Taiwan is different from any other scenario or situation. Taiwan is not an independent state. It's not an independent state. Taiwan is a province of the People's Republic of China. The status of Taiwan is in the Cairo Declaration, is in the Potsdam Pro Declaration, is in the UN resolutions, It's in bilateral documents between China and Australia. Taiwan is a province of China. And the issue between China and Taiwan is an issue between the central government of People's Republic of China with a local government. It's an issue of reunification, complete reunification, and an issue of Taiwan coming back to the motherland. As for our approach to the question of the Taiwan, I think it's consistent, clear, and pretty open. We have made that on many occasions over the past several decades, actually, that the people in the mainland, people in Taiwan, are Chinese. We are both Chinese. And the Taiwanese are compatriots of China. And the least thing we're ready to do is to use force. And that is one of the reasons why China has been so patient. For several decades, we are waiting. We are waiting for a peaceful unification. But we can never rule out our option to use other means. So when necessary, when compelled, we are ready to use all necessary means. As to what does it mean by all necessary means, you can use your imagination. But the people, but the 1.4 billion Chinese people are absolutely determined to protect our sovereignty, territory, and integrity. We will never allow Taiwan to be separated from China. I think that is our policy. Thank you.
Next question is from Ben Packham from The Australian.
Ambassador, thank you. Your colleague, the Chinese ambassador to France, told French media recently that when China takes over Taiwan, it will re-educate its 23 million people. Can you confirm with a yes or no, is that Chinese government policy? Will China re-educate Taiwan's people to change their minds about the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, thanks, Ben, for your question. But I didn't read the news about my colleagues' remarks on this particular issue. I think, given the situation that the people in Taiwan, the people in Taiwan are under a regional regime for many decades, it is reasonable for us to understand that their perspective about China, their perspective about their motherland might take somewhat different views. I think this is a fact. But I think the key point now is not about either education or re-education. The 1.4 billion Chinese people, including the 80 million people in Taiwan, are all Chinese. Yeah.
So that sounds like a yes. Is that a yes? It sounds like a yes.
What do you mean by yes?
That it is Chinese policy that they will need re-educating.
Well, I'm not going to speak on behalf of our ambassador in France. I'm
just asking on a point of policy.
The policy?
On a point of policy.
I haven't read about such a official policy. But I think my personal understanding is that once Taiwan is reunited, coming back to the motherland, there might be a process for the people in Taiwan to have a correct understanding of China, about their motherland.
Along the lines of the camps that you have in Xinjiang, the education process in Xinjiang?
Are we talking about a different topic?
Well, that's a re-education process, isn't it?
No, there's not. I would rather not use the word re-education. The people in Xinjiang are also Chinese citizens, and they receive education in school, in colleges, in universities about China, about their motherland. Yeah, this is pretty normal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
The next question is from Chris Uhlmann from the Nine Network.
Ambassador Chris Uhlmann, Nine News. I was interested in your comments on respect for international law and also that we needed to have positive policies and your guidance for the media in Australia about being positive towards China. If I could just make a couple of observations about why people might have a negative view. You've occupied and militarised the South China Sea in contravention of international law. Recently, you threatened an Australian Air Force aircraft flying over those waters under rights under international law. You've imprisoned our citizens without rights to national justice. You have launched thousands of attacks against private and public sector through cyber. You've interfered in our politics, our universities and our diaspora and the people that you call the 1.2 million overseas Chinese. Many of them we would call Australian citizens who owe a right, a duty to Australia. So can you see why it might be that some Australians would think that when you talk about international law and positive policies, you do not do what you say?
Well, is it a statement? You have no question?
No, I made some observations given you thought we were...
So you are making observations. You are making statements.
I'm making some observations. You were talking about reporting, so I was wondering why you might think that people would not see those things as being negative policies.
Well, are you inviting me to comment on your observations?
I'm inviting you to comment on whether or not you're occupying and militarising the South China Sea in contravention of international law and whether or not you threatened Australian aircraft in that airspace.
Okay, I'll try to be brief because you covered quite a number of issues. First, on the South China Sea, China and several other countries, we are all claimants of certain areas and territories in South China Sea. And China, we inherited this claim from our previous government, and who's now in Taiwan, the so-called Republic of China. And there's no room for the people of the Republic of China to deviate from our claim, and we'll continue to stick to the position to protect our sovereignty and territorial integrity. But at the same time, I understand there are differences, there are disputes between China and some other countries. So China and the relevant claimant countries are involved in discussions, consultations, even negotiations bilaterally. And multilaterally, we are involved with ASEAN countries in formulating Code of Conduct, Declaration, DOC, Declaration of Conduct, now in the process of formulating a COC, Code of Conduct, trying to sort out a framework for addressing such issues in the future. Secondly, about the existence of China in these areas and the military existence, it is the necessary measures we have to take to protect the security of the areas which belong to us, and as has been done by many other claimants as well. They have done that much earlier. Thirdly, you mentioned about the aircraft incident, about between China and Australia. May I point out that that incident was very unfortunate. It happened not in the South China Sea in general. There's a too big area. You cannot say that it happened in the earth. It's happened at a particular location. That location is within the territorial space of an island that belongs to China. So it's just like you're in your house, within your compound. Somebody is driving around, carrying a gun, and trying to peep into your window, see what you're doing in your family and what you're talking about between your family members. You feel a bit threatened, and you feel uncomfortable. So you have to come out and tell those people to keep distance at least.
Under international
so that's
law,
the point I want to make.
Neighbour's house.
And then about the Chinese Australians, I want to say a few words on this because it's so sensitive. There are 1.2 billion Chinese Australians, and these are naturalized Australians. They are Australian citizens. They are loyal to Australia. They are not loyal to China. But at the same time, they came from China. Their ancestors, they have blood relation with China. So they are a linkage of friendship and cooperation between our two countries. And you have to, if you watch very carefully, my embassy is very careful. Ever since I came here 7 months ago, I never comment on the Chinese-Australian issue. During the federal election, I didn't make any comment. Even when I met some of the Chinese Australians, I never talked about the elections. It's their domestic affairs. It's for the Australian people, including Chinese Australians, to make their own choices. At the same time, I want to emphasize this here. Australia is a diversified nation. People from different parts of the world come into this country. They form the community, a nation called Australian people. And Chinese people are part of those people. They are making contribution to this great country. Their interests, just like many other ethnic groups in this country, should be respected. Thank you.
Next question is from Claire Armstrong from News Corp Australia.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your time. You said that Zhang Lei's rights were protected. She is an Australian citizen, a journalist who almost 2 years ago to the day was arrested. The details of the charges against her remain unknown. She was tried in secret. The Australian ambassador was not allowed in the courtroom when this happened, and there is no details about when she may be sentenced or what her future is. Her family have raised concerns about her health issues and are alleging there have been even restrictions on food. So how are her rights protected? And if China is serious about resetting the relationship with Australia, why won't you release her?
Well, thanks for the question. I understand that any citizen from Australia who is detained overseas should be in a sensitive issue. And just like Assange, or Mr. Pavlov, who's detained in the United Kingdom. The case of Chen Lei, the person you're talking about, is still in the jurisdiction process. And in addition, what I have said earlier, I want to emphasize that this case involves national security. She's been charged of transmitting informations relating to national security overseas. So it is common practice in not only in China, but also in many other countries as well, that when cases involving national security, the trial is conducted in a way usually is not open to the public.
And there's no appetite to release her at this stage, is what you're saying?
Well, I think we all have to respect the laws and regulations of China. It's still under process. Thank you.
Next question is from Kieran Gilbert from Sky News.
Ambassador, thank you for your address. You said that China isn't seeking to be a hegemony or expand a sphere of influence. Is China planning to establish a military base in the Pacific, possibly on the Solomons? And as we look at the human catastrophe in Ukraine, what can the international community, including China, learn from that catastrophe when dealing with Taiwan?
Well, thank you for your question. It's the relation between China and the Pacific Island countries has been one of the most discussed issues within the past couple of months. Allow me to say that we're having relations with, we're developing a relationship with many countries in different parts of the world. In Southeast Asia, with ASEAN countries, with South Asian countries, with Central Asian countries, African countries, even European countries, and Latin American countries. Our relationship with the Pacific country is just similarly part of our relationship with different parts of the countries in different parts of the world. The purpose is to develop a friendship of cooperation and to help this region and these countries for a political stability, social harmony, and more importantly, a priority, economic development. As for the relation between China and the Solomon Islands, I think our foreign minister, our spokesperson, and also our people have made it pretty clear on several occasions that China come to Solomon Islands upon request of the government of that country. And there's no reason for us to refuse to help. But the purpose is help them to stabilize, to prosper, and to improve. There is no intention for China to set up the so-called military base in Solomon Islands. And the leader of the country have said a similar thing. I think, should I say that the page is turned? What is next to be done is, I hope that China and Australia, we can cooperate, either bilaterally or trilaterally, or quadruple way, to cooperate between China and Australia plus Pacific Island countries for the stability, social harmony, and economic development. For example, climate change. I think there's a lot we can do between China and Australia to help those countries to improve their situation. Thank you.
Next question is from Andrew Tillett from the Australian Financial Review.
Yes, thanks, David. Ambassador, thanks for appearing today. I just want to go back to Taiwan. And implicit in your comments is sort of, you talk about it obviously from the PRC perspective, but there are 23 million people in Taiwan. Don't they get a say in what should happen to their future?
Beg your pardon?
There are 23 million people in Taiwan. Mm-hmm. Don't they get a say in what should happen about their future? You talk about reunification, but it would be on China's terms, wouldn't it? I mean, one country, two systems, the deal that was offered to Hong Kong is dead. We've seen that in the last couple of years. That might have been a deal that the Taiwanese were tempted by in the 90s, but would not be now. So you talk about, you know, the white paper, the paper out today talks about leaving the option of taking Taiwan by force. But what about the 23 million Taiwanese people? Don't they get a say in their future?
Well, first, thank you, Andrew, for your question. A few words on the Hong Kong. Hong Kong have been applying this one country two system. Generally, it's been successful. There have been problems during the process. That was because there were some loopholes in this process. And by taking necessary measures at the national constitutional level, we have solved the problem. And we have full confidence that the future of Hong Kong will be even brighter. And if you look at the numbers, the economic development performance, the Hong Kong's economic performance has much better than it was. Than the number it was when it was under British colony rule. And their economic performance is much better than the United Kingdom, sorry to say that. And so we have reason to believe there'll be a future. And look at China's development, and there's a much, much bigger room for Hong Kong to get more prosperous in the future. Secondly, on the question of Taiwan, I think you're talking about the will and wishes of the Taiwanese people. Taiwan is part of China, and 1.4 billion Chinese people are determined to protect that, to be affected, and the future of Taiwan will be decided by 1.4 billion Chinese people. And at the same time, I believe that the majority of the people in Taiwan believe they're Chinese. They believe Taiwan is part of China, and Taiwan is a province of China. They are for reunification. There, we do have a group of people, or hand of people perhaps, they are seeking for Taiwan independence movement, gradual independence. They are trying to remove marks that are telling Taiwanese people that these are the people they are Chinese, and these are activities they are being resisted by the majority of people in Taiwan. That's what we believe.
Well, don't the opinion polls show that most people in Taiwan prefer the status quo, not independence, not being part of China, but the status quo, the current system?
Well, I think the poll is misleading. If you look at the poll for the previous election, you know, in this country, federal election, the opinion polls turn out to be just the opposite. I think it is quite obvious. Even the people in Taiwan who are in power in the local government, even the senior officials in Taiwan, believe they're Chinese. They want to have China to be part of China, to have Taiwan to be part of China.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Next question is from Mark Riley from the 7 Network.
Mr. Ambassador, just a couple of statements you've made today, if I could ask a question on those. You said that this is a possibility for a reset in the relationship. Prime Minister Albanese has said he's prepared to meet President Xi in Bali, the G20 in November. Will China allow that to happen? Will there be an invitation to the Prime Minister to meet with President Xi? You've also given us quite a discursive admonition to countries in the region about acting with mutual respect, cooperation and friendship. And then you've said, quote, Australia should handle the Taiwan question with caution. That sounds like a threat. Is it?
Thank you for the question. For the bilateral relationship, as I said, our policy to Australia remains unchanged. We are for a friendly, cooperative relationship between China and Australia. As I said personally, when I just came here, I'm a new ambassador. I'm here to seek friends, not to seek rivals or adversaries or even enemies. But at the same time, after the couple of years of difficult situation between China and Australia, there's going to be a process for us to reset and gradually improve our relationship. And now what we have now is just a good start, and there's more to be done, including creating a favorable atmosphere between our two countries politically. Political relations is important. When we have a good one, they are helpful to our cooperation in other fields. Other way around is going to hurting our cooperations. As for the top-level contacts, there have been communication between two prime ministers by sending exchange of letters or messages, and there have been minister-level meetings. I personally would wish to see a gradual improvement of atmosphere to create a favorable condition for a more wide range of communications at various levels, including the top levels. Second, on the Taiwan question, the question of Taiwan, caution is just to remind. It's not here as ambassador in this country. The least thing I would do is to make demand or to sound like demanding. Australia is a big nation. It's a great nation. I have all my full respect. But I would like to remind that big and great as Australia is, it is important for the government in this country to stick to the commitment of One China policy. And this commitment should be not only in words, but also in deeds. Not only in name, but also in essence. And it should be practiced with absolute sincerity, but without discount. Thank you.
I would like to follow up on that question about a Bali meeting, because I'm curious about, you sound like you are in favour of improving relations towards a meeting between Anthony Albanese and President Xi. Can you identify right now any obstacle, any reason why they should not be able to have a formal meeting in Bali at the G20?
Well, if you look at the past couple of years when we have political difficulties, you feel uncomfortable to meet each other. And let's take in a very bad example. If you are, say talking bad about me, why should I meet you? You humiliated me publicly, and should I meet you to be humiliated again face to face? The meeting at the top level is very important, not in the sense of symbolism, but also in essence. Once we have a high-level meeting, we hope it's going to be helpful in developing a more positive relationship instead of making it worse. So when there was no top-level meetings between the two countries during the past couple of years, it is because we did not believe the meeting would help to improve the relationship. And we were concerned a meeting could perhaps make things even more deteriorate. As for the few upcoming multilateral forum like East Asia Summit, APEC Summit, a G20 Summit are going to be in Bali, and APEC in Thailand, I guess, and ASEAN in Phnom Penh. Yeah, and we are. I think we're going to communicate with our Australian colleagues through diplomatic channels to see when appropriate or when we have the necessary condition and atmosphere, whether or not both sides have the willingness to get engaged in a top-level meeting. As ambassador, I'm hoping for the best, and I'm going to try to make all my efforts towards that direction.
The next question is from Dominic Giannini from AAP.
Dominic Giannini from AAP. Thank you, Ambassador. Given your focus on sovereignty and non-interventionism, how are we supposed to take that seriously from China, given the failure to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine and continued cooperation with Russia? And how are we to take your condemnation of Australian media seriously, given the quashing of dissidents and disinformation around in China?
Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting question in the sense that it's been asked again and again on many occasions for the past couple of months. My answer is there's no simple answer to a question of complexity. If you look at what has happened in Ukraine, it involves many aspects. It involves the relations, the disputes between NATO and Russia. There is security concern from Russia. And they are feeling that they've been countered again and again, at least 6 or 7 times, by the expansion of NATO towards eastwards, which is a break away from their promise that not to do that. And there's also for this issue, I think it's we're for a bilateral negotiation between NATO members, especially the United States and Russia, to sit down and negotiate for a comprehensive, sustainable security mechanism. And the second layer, perhaps the relation between disputes between Ukraine and Russia. And these two countries are both friendly countries to China. We have good relations with Russia, for true, yes. But at the same time, we have a very good relation with Ukraine as well. Also very in-depth cooperation in many areas, including technology. And there's no reason for us to support one against the other, or other way around. But these two countries used to be part of the former Soviet Union, and so the relation between these two countries is rather complicated. We are for a bilateral discussion at the table to find out a political solution between these two countries. And thirdly, perhaps it's the role of Ukraine vis-a-vis the relation between NATO and Russia. I'm not going to comment on that, but may I just remind that we have some very important views expressed by Dr. Henry Kissinger I think a couple of years ago in the New York Times. He is for a more strategic kind of vision to properly handle these issues. Thank you.
And on the media in China?
Uh-huh.
The media in China, how you criticise the Australian media for not giving China enough positive attention. Is China cracking down on media in its home country?
I don't quite catch the point you're making, man. I mean, yeah, the media in China are also being affected on attitudes towards Australia when they have when they know that there's a very positive attitudes in this country about China, which is very unfortunate, and it's not necessary. We might have different views on many issues between China and Australia, but there's so many things we have in common, and we can cooperate. And even we have diplomatic channels just quite open between our two countries. When we have difference, we can talk, we can sit down and discuss, try to sort it out, and try to narrow it down if possible. Otherwise, we can perhaps leave aside and focus our efforts on the common areas and go on with our cooperation, because it's good for our two countries. And instead of focusing too much publicly on the differences, countries have differences, even among people, even between among brothers and sisters, you have different views. Even between husband and wife, sometimes you quarrel. But it's one thing for the husband and wife to quarrel and fight at home. It's something else if they fight downtown in the street. It's going to change the nature of the marriage. So I'm for a proper modality to handle the differences between our two great nations. We have so many things we can cooperate, and we should not allow these differences to hijack our cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador, we've got one last question, which is from Chloe Burris from Network 10.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Australia has been very clear in asking for a de-escalation of the military drills. China's foreign ministry has in turn accused Australia of breaching the UN Charter. Do you share that view?
Sorry, I didn't catch your question.
China has accused Australia of breaching the UN Charter by calling for a de-escalation of the military drills. Do you share that view?
Well, let me say a few points on this issue. If you follow the statements of the Chinese embassy spokesperson, the beautiful lady there, she is our spokesperson. After what has happened recently by Speaker Pelosi's visit to China's Taiwan province, we have made a number of remarks. And number one, these remarks are in reaction to the remarks made by the Australian side. When there was when there was a view expressed in the public, in the media in this country about the relation between China and the U.S. vis-a-vis Taiwan question, my spokesperson made a statement or remark to tell what it is. Our position on Taiwan question, our position on the Speaker Pelosi's visit, our position on One China policy, and our request. We asked for Australia to understand and support China's position of One China policy, which is also a policy of the Australian government. Then after some further statements by the Australian government, either the Minister of Foreign Affairs or Foreign Minister, we made further remarks to elaborate on our positions. But continuously, we've been asking for understanding, appreciation of our One China policy from the Australian side. It was only after the joint statement by the three foreign ministers, Australia, US, Japan, they would not only express their serious concern, but also used condemnation on China's missile launch in the so-called Japanese EEZ, exclusive economic zones. It was only then that the spokesperson of my embassy made a remark expressing our serious concern, strong discontent, and we used the word condemnation. Because, number one, it was the US side who was the one who fired the first shot. The other ones who violated the One China principle, they say they are committed to One China principle in words, but actually they are doing something just the opposite. And the other ones who provoked it, we were the ones who reacted for defense to protect their territorial sovereignty and integrity. And secondly, the area in question vis-a-vis China and Japan was still an unresolved issue. There's no solution. Which area? I mean, that particular area belongs to either China or Japan. So it's an area, the area in question, I mean, the area where the ballistic missile dropped in is an area of dispute between China and Japan. And usually, among countries, when there's a dispute between two countries, the non-claimant countries stand in neutral instead of choosing to support one against the other, because it involves territorial dispute. So we were surprised by Australian governments to choosing a side to support Japan. And Japan's claim was legally unfounded, and it's invalid. And thirdly, our wish is that as good partners between China and Australia, we hope that our Australian government respect China's territorial integrity and national unity, and stick to the One China policy, not only, as I said, in words, in deeds, and inaction. And it's an issue not to be compromised. And it's an issue not to be discussed and practiced in a blurred way. Yeah. It's an issue so sensitive to China. If we can make compromise on many other issues, economic issues, trade issues, or any other issues, there's absolutely no room for us to compromise on the question of the Taiwan, because it's a question of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Just like no Australian government would ever compromise on Australia's territorial integrity. And just like, maybe it's not a good example, but Tasmania will be a part of Australia. And this involves the territorial integrity. And I hope we could have some understanding from our friends and colleagues from this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking the Ambassador for his speech today. Thank you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate this is your first speech to the National Press Club. And on behalf of the National Press Club, I have a bottle of Penfolds, because Penfolds and Treasury Wines has just had a success in China in beating a copycat winemaker to reinforce their brand. So please accept that from the National Press Club, a good Australian wine.
What a great honour.